That's so brilliant. This video is sponsored by Photrus.
Yeah, that's quite funny actually. I mean, everyone talks about f-stops, but no one seems to think about light transmission. But these are two completely different things. I mean, we shoot a lot in darker conditions where we want to keep the ISO as low as possible, right? We want to get the best possible image sharpness, and we also want to reduce the weight of our backpack as much as possible. And when we break that all down now, honestly, there is only one answer. Should we use zoom or prime lenses in landscape photography? Let's find out with this video. My friends, very nice to see you. Over the years I shot a lot with zoom lenses and I shot a lot with prime lenses. So what is the difference actually? Now, technically spoken, the architecture of zoom lenses is much more complicated than that of prime lenses. I mean, it's logical. If you want to build your own lenses yourself, it's not enough just, to achieve that the light ray meet at the focal point of the lens to bring light on your sensor, right? That would be easy. No, it's all about bringing that light into a form that there is as little distortion as possible, as little chromatic aberration and color fringing as possible, and that the sharpness is as much possible spread over the entire frame and not only to the center of the image. And that for the highest possible aperture range, right? So there are a lot of things to be considered. And this is why lens manufacturers consider multiple lens elements in one single lens, just for corrections. Now, the main difference in the architecture between zoom and prime lenses is simply that these corrections have to work for zoom lenses even on each single focal length we adjust on the lens, and that makes things really super complicated on zoom lenses. Prime lenses instead are so much easier to build. There are also corrections necessary, of course, but they have just to be considered for one and only focal length. And this is why prime lenses don't need as many lens elements as zoom lenses. And this fact doesn't make prime lenses only cheaper than zoom lenses. It also leads to a much higher image quality. And that also allows prime lenses to be built in a way so they can catch much more light than zoom lenses. And I'm not talking about the f-stop here. No, I'm talking about light transmissions. These are two different pair of shoes. What is f-stop? And this is what Wikipedia says. F-stop is calculated by dividing the system's focal length by the diameter of the entrance pupil. That is the definition of the f-stop. Or in other words, it is the ratio between the focal length and the lens diameter. That's the f-stop. So it's just a calculation. It doesn't take into account how much light there really goes through the lens. How much light we send in and how much there goes out on the other side onto our sensor. We are talking about light transmission here. We want to keep our ISO as low as possible, right? And we are not interested in the ergonomics of our lens in the first place, right? Now, the thing is, the most important factor for light transmission, besides the glass quality and the thickness of the glass, is the number of lens elements inside a lens. The more lens elements, the worse the light transmission, obviously. Again, zoom lenses need many more elements inside a lens for corrections than prime lenses. It's not the f-stop only. A prime lens catches even more light when using the same f-stop than a zoom lens. It's not the f-stop, it's the t-stop. It's the transmission stop, which also considers the transmission, obviously. And you find that value in the specs of your lenses, by the way. Prime lenses are cheaper, faster, smaller, lighter. So why in the world would anyone still buy a zoom lens? It doesn't seem to make any sense, right? Now the only answer to the question is, do we need that possibility to zoom actually? Because that's the one and only thing a prime lens can't do. So is it necessary to zoom? I mean, we could also go closer with our camera position, right? Or is there any problem with that? Is this something else or is this the same thing? And before I will answer that, my friends, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. It really helps me to make this video better visible on YouTube, also for other photographers out there. So thank you therefore. Okay, so do we need to zoom? Or could we also, just go closer with our camera? Well, first of all, going closer is not always possible, of course. Just think about, standing at the shore of a lake or so, or even at a cliff. At a lake you could maybe use a boat or so to go closer and try to get rid of the swinging then inside the boat, if that's possible, however. But at a cliff, it's impossible unless you use a drone. When it's allowed to fly there, but By the way, is it allowed to fly drones in your area? Leave me a comment below, would really be interested. In my area, I have to say it is allowed, but just not on places where it's beautiful, where I could also take a photograph. But that's another topic. However, going closer is not always possible, but even if it is possible, going closer doesn't have the same effect as zooming in. And that is because we change the perspective by going closer. If we just zoomed in instead, the perspective stays the same because the camera position is the same. So going closer is not the same as zooming in. It changed the image. If I had gone closer in this image here, for instance, the deadwood in the foreground had got bigger, whilst the background wouldn't have changed much. Going closer changed the perspective so that closer elements appear bigger in our image, and zooming in instead makes everything in our frame equally bigger, the foreground and the distance. That leads to that, felt kind of compression of longer lenses, but it's not really compression. Longer focal lengths do not compress. It just looks like that because everything gets equally bigger, also the background mountains or so. And that means now, by going closer or further away, we can affect how big or small elements appear on different layers. And we can also affect how much we want to get into our frame on different layers. Maybe there are many interesting elements in the foreground, but there are many distracting elements in the distance. Then it is a good idea to go further away from the foreground and to zoom in, so that we get rid of distracting elements in the distance, because everything gets a little bit closer than there. Or we want to show the foreground bigger than the distance to make it more relevant, the foreground in our composition. Then we have to go closer to the foreground and to zoom out. We can control that by zooming, my friends. Of course, we could also, I know what you mean, we could also use one shorter prime lens and one longer one, but even then, we can't fine-tune our composition. There would always be any compromises we would have to make. Either there would be distracting elements in the foreground or in the distance. In this image here, I wanted to take this rock here into my frame with exactly these waves here at the left and at the right hand side. It wouldn't have made any sense to take more of the foreground in. The size of my foreground is ideal here already. And same with the distance. The area left or right beside that mountain wouldn't add to this image. Going closer or further away would change this ratio between foreground and distance. So the camera position and the focal length are ideal in this image. And we need both camera position and focal length. The only thing that would theoretically work is we could use prime lenses and we could crop in afterwards in post-processing, right? But honestly, by that, we would lose image quality on the one hand, but even more important, it would get completely impossible to fine-tune a composition out in the field. Because by that, we don't see exactly what our composition looks like when we look through the viewfinder. We would always have to imagine how the image would look if we would crop in, and that not slightly in many cases. And I have to say, I photograph already since 1990, and I'm quite good with imagination, I think. But to be honest, that doesn't work for me to get a really strong image in there. Fine-tuning is one of the most important things we have to do out in the field. And that's even a big strength of landscape photographers, that they have time to make the composition even better by fine-tuning. It's true, the image would get sharper with prime lenses, but we would almost never get a clean composition. And the clean composition is much more important than more sharpness. I always make sure that my entire image is in focus, of course, and in my experience, the sharpness of good zoom lenses is absolutely enough. You see the difference just if you zoom in to 100% or so. There's really no reason at all for me to use prime lenses. There are fantastic ways to get sharper images independent of the lenses you use, out in the field, but also afterwards in post-processing. but there's so many mistakes made that could even ruin your photos. And I made already a really good video about that. I will link it here for you. My friends, I hope you liked this video. If you have shared with your friends, and thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.